Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Big Lee's World Podcast. It is I, your host, Big Lee, coming to you live from Big Lee's Boom Boom Room right here in Cape Girardeau. I just want to start this episode out by saying thanks to everybody for all the love and support you've shown over the past few episodes. Our last episode with Miss Marley Knox is on the fast track of becoming our most popular episode yet. It is also becoming the most controversial episode that we've had. So definitely make sure that if you've not listened to it, go through your favorite podcast subscription site vendor and give it a listen, give it a share, a like. We appreciate all the support. And today, I've been hyping it since we've started doing the podcast. I talked about it a lot on the last one. Today, I have with me the infamous founder of all the great cons that come to Cape Girardeau. Cape Con, Anime Con, and also starting this year where you can come meet your boy Big Lee October the 19th. However, the con is both October 18th and 19th at the Osage Center. That is Cape Fear Con. And today I would like to welcome Mr. Ken Murphy. Ken, welcome to the Big Lee's World Podcast. We appreciate you coming out, and thanks for being a guest.
Lee, this is a thrill, man. I am excited to be here. Great introduction. Thank you for that. I know you mentioned the controversial recent podcast, and I don't know that I'm a controversial guy, but you never know what topics of conversation we might get into today. Man, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I mean, if you take pen and paper and if you had people describe the two of us, you probably can't get two more opposite people than you and I. And I've said this from the time, well, I shouldn't say the time we met, because I've met you a few times. You had no idea who I was. And then once we went into business, which we'll get into here in a little bit. So first off, tell people how you got started in the con business. At first, and let me clarify this up front. When I say the con business, I'm talking about conventions, comic cons, things of that venture, not cons like
Confidence.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of a television show called Sneaky Pete, and he refers to what he does as confidence, the confidence game, gaining one's confidence. No, this is the convention. I guess you're speaking of the convention.
The convention
game.
Yes.
In 1995, I opened up a comic book store. No, that's not true. I bought an existing comic book store here in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, down on Broadway, that I had shopped at a little bit through the late 80s, early 90s. And I purchased it in 1995. Had a great 13-year run with it. Really enjoyed the business. To celebrate the 10th anniversary of that store, I had been traveling around to a lot of the bigger shows. At that time, again, you're going back 23 years, 24 years. Fan conventions, comic book conventions, you name it, where people gather and get together and enjoy these kind of things. There weren't that many. Man, there weren't. In the state of Missouri, there was one successful one in Kansas City, and it started around 92. And then just some smaller ones that came and went. And then around the country, Atlanta, Chicago obviously was a staple. San Diego's the godfather. So I'd go to these shows. I'd fly to San Diego, I'd fly to Chicago, I'd fly to Atlanta, acting like I was doing business for my comic book store, and all the time just enjoying myself as a fan as well. And to celebrate the 10th anniversary of that store, I put on the first Cape Comic Con, downtown, upstairs, Buckner's. Yeah, I had no idea what I was doing. Just none, other than what I saw at the big shows. Oh, look, booth sales, exhibitors, professional artists and writers. The celebrity thing hadn't hit yet. It really hadn't. So we put our first show on around, 2005? And it was a blast. It was fun. I joke all the time that my wife said, hey, you're putting a lot of work into this, and you're putting some investment, you're putting some money behind it. And she said, hey, why don't you just not lose any money on this? And I said, yeah, I'm going to try to do that. So as long as we were supported and we had a good time doing it, and at the end of the weekend we could pay the bills for the show, we get to keep doing it. And that's where it all started, with the first comic book convention.
Okay, so you said this started 2005.
Well, the 15th anniversary is in April. So right. 2006.
Okay, so
2006.
2006. So my first Ken Murphy experience, I guess, would have to be, was it 2008?
2008, that's correct.
When you were running, Well, it was the South Rec Center on the SEMO campus, correct?
That is correct, sir.
And it had the building split because you had a Comic-Con there, and then you brought in the NWA show.
Well, it wasn't split, Lee. We dropped the ring right dead center of the con on the same floor.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We did the show. It was a weekend. It was a Friday, Saturday show. Friday, Saturday, Sunday show. And we did the wrestling on Saturday night. So we actually sold the exhibit space around the perimeter of the gym floor and left the middle of the gym floor for gaming on Friday. We suspended gaming for Saturday. They put the ring dead in the center, and it was the NWA group with the licensed promoter. His name will come to me. Ed Chuman, Chuman, out of Chicago. And he was a board of directors on the old NWA in the 90s. And he came down and put the show on for us. That's where we first met. And yes, I'm Big Lee. Man, I've seen the pictures. I know you were there, but I don't remember the big handshake and the bro hug.
Yeah, I'm sure at that time what I remember with that show in particular was I remember you coming outside multiple times because the show was delayed.
Right.
So what happened? Why was the show delayed?
Man, Lee, so this will not surprise you. Lee, we've done a lot of business together in the last 5 years. This won't surprise you. I had very little control of that show, if any. Sure, I ran the Comic Con and I bought the wrestling show. When it came time for the wrestling show to be executed, I had nothing to do, nothing at all. I do remember coming out. I do remember telling you guys, oh, hang on, we're going to try to get this show started, blah, 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 twice at least. Why? No idea. They were taping the show, and I know when they let the fans in, they had to get all the fans to one side, all 100 of them maybe. They all had to sit on one or two sides so where the camera could hit the people as opposed to empty second row, third row, blah, blah, blah. I remember that. I can tell you a little bit about the show, but not much. What were your takeaways and memories of that event?
So, some of my big takeaways from that event, and what I always tell people is anytime you get a chance to check out an indie show, you should take that chance because you never know what stars of tomorrow or what historical events can happen there that can shape the form of wrestling. And with that being said, that show had the Young Bucks on it.
It did.
They were up and coming tag team. And probably the thing that I remember the most,
Lee, were they really up and coming? Were they actually on the radar anywhere in 2008?
I think that was right when they were getting ready to, they either started or getting ready to start doing business, I believe, with TNA.
Okay.
Which led into the main event of that night. And the big, I would say controversy, because I think a lot of people had expected some stuff to happen there. And when it actually did, we were all kind of surprised. The main event being, which I'll never forget, was Awesome Kong versus Mischief for the NWA Women's title. And at the time, what had happened is that TNA and the NWA were splitting.
Right.
And they were trying to pull the belts off of TNA talent and moving it to the NWA side that they could travel with. So going into it, we were kind of like, is this going to be Mischief's night? Is she really going to go over the TV star? And to be there live to see that not only did she win the belt, that was the last belt to be separated from NWA and TNA. And to see that actually happen live in Cape and be in Cape Girardeau and be a part of a synonymous part of wrestling history, I think is pretty awesome. And I think that's one of the great things about going to indie wrestling. And like I said, you should always, if you get a chance, always go out, support your local indie wrestling company, and make sure to check out a show there.
Yeah, I that's funny that you bring that up to start our conversation this evening. We've been a part of Cape Championship Wrestling now, coming up on 5 years. And if someone were to ask me, hey, Ken, did that show in 2008, was it a catalyst in any way to where the light would go on in your head and you would say, I'd like to start an indie promotion in Cape Girardeau, Missouri? The answer would be 100% no. never once crossed my mind. I wanted a cool evening of content for the 3 days of the Comic-Con, and I love wrestling. And Ben Oliver out of St. Louis, was bringing a show to town about every 8 weeks. And help me out, Lee. Was it Gateway Championship Wrestling or was it Midwest Renegade? It was one or the other because those promotions flip-flopped.
See, that one I'm not too for sure
Is that right?
about because at that time, I don't remember any other wrestling company coming to WWE or WWE coming to Cape besides the WWE and then the failed attempts of TNA coming to Cape Girardeau.
Now, we had to look it up. Some of the CCW fans and I were talking, and we wanted to get to the bottom of who ran last, how long did they run, and what was the last indie show in Cape, blah, blah, blah. So we looked it up. There's a site for it, and they ran 13 shows over 2 years, and Ben Oliver was the promoter, and he was a wrestler. And he said to me, hey, would you like to do a show? I can get you in contact. And being a big NWA fan as a kid, I thought,
still is.
And still is. I'll hopefully talk more about that. So yeah, the show, again, I just bought the show. He came down, put it all on. It was a good experience. I loved seeing Awesome Kong work. I do remember the Young Bucks. I actually remember most of the matches. But when it ended, it was just Cape Comic-Con the next year coming up in April and didn't really think a thing about indie wrestling until years later.
I think the other thing to kind of, it's not the highlight of that show by any means, but I think the other thing that I remember about that was I believe it was Davey Richards who came out and was spitting on the crowd.
Correct. And I didn't remember that till CCW startup, and his name got mentioned, and someone said, hey, I remember he slapped at me and spit on me, and that's just crazy. But that was Davey Richards, yes. Correct.
Yep.
True.
So, from there, I didn't have much more interaction with Ken Murphy until Comic-Con time rolled around. Because I was one of these people, it was like I've grown up loving the wrestling business, having different roles and stuff like that in it. And anytime Ken would bring in a guest for the wrestling, like somehow, some way, I would make it to where I could go, at least support it, go out, be the reason that it was there, buy something they were selling, just to make the draw good to bring in wrestling. Make it wrestling guys.
So Lawler was the first, right?
Yes, Lawler was the first.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting because he was a Friday, Saturday deal.
Correct.
He had the sit-down speaking.
Yeah, we did a Q&A session.
Yep. So I missed that because, oddly enough, Jerry Lawler's friend, the Memphis rapper Muck Sticky,
yes,
was playing at Pitter's. So, what kind of defines the relationship of me and one of my best friends, Justin Lane, he was at the speaking convention that Friday for the Jerry Lawler deal, and I was at Pitter's and talking with Muck Sticky, and he asked me about what was going on this weekend in town, and I told him about the con and Jerry Lawler being here. And we kind of exchanged some things about our endeavors with Jerry Lawler, and he was telling me how big of a fan he was. So then, of course, the next day, that Saturday, I came in, and that's when I met Jerry. And then it continued on. I know you brought in Beautiful Bobby.
Jim Cornette.
Yep.
It was Cornette, then Beautiful Bobby.
All right, yep. So with Cornette, we met Cornette, talked with him before he became a nutcase or whatever you want to call it. We're not going to get into that here. But anyways, into that, then you had Bobby Eaton.
I did. Absolutely.
Now.
Yeah, then the next year is the show we brought in where we met 6 months before that.
Okay.
At AT&T.
So, we'll get to there. So, as I always say, back when a former job I had when I worked for a mobile communication company.
Got it.
I was there working, and this guy came in, and you could tell looking at him, he's a cheap guy.
Yeah.
And he came in to ask some questions about his phone, and how his phone worked, and why it wasn't doing what it needed to do, and things of that nature. So I sat down with him at the table, kind of going through things, and at the time, my work phone was on the table, and I had gotten a text message from another customer, and it had lit up. And when it lit up, at the time, it was a background of a picture with me and Juggalo rapper Boondocks. And I will never forget this, because as soon as it happens, like, I don't even really notice it at the time, but Ken looks over and he says, "Hey, that's cool, you got a picture with Sting." And I was like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah, Sting.
And he's like, "Your phone thing, it lit up, and it was a picture of you and Sting." It's like, well, I've met Sting, but that's the Juggalo rapper Boondocks. So he asked me at that time if I was kind of big into wrestling and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, I am. I actually met you a couple times at the Comic-Con when you brought in guys. I'm not a big comic person. However, you bring the wrestling thing in, support it. And he was like, "Hey, can we exchange contact information? I'd really like to talk to you more about this." So I'm like, okay, sure. Yeah, here you go. So we exchange contacts and we start converting back and forth. And that's when Ken tells me, "Hey, I want to start a wrestling company and run a show at Cape Comic Con." I'm like, okay, cool. He's like, "Do you know anybody that books talent?" And I said, "I think so. Let me reach out." So that is at the time where I reach out to Mr. Jason Wells and tell him, I'm like, "Dude, you ain't gonna believe this. I met a guy come into AT&T and he's like telling me he wants to start a wrestling company. You want to get into some booking and let's do something here?" And Jason's like, "Yeah, sure." So I reach out to Ken, tell him. Ken's like, "Okay, cool." Then I don't hear from Ken. Ken goes silent on me a little bit. Jason messages me one day and he's like, "So whatever came about with that wrestling deal? Is he still wanting to do it? What's up?" He's like, "Well, let me reach out to him again." Okay. So I reach out to him. He messaged me back and he's like, "Hey, let's all get dinner." Okay, cool. So we meet up at the Logan's Steakhouse.
It was indeed the Logan Steakhouse.
And I was afraid to say that because I was sitting here thinking, I was like, boy, I hope that's Logan's one beside Best Buy.
Yep.
So we meet there, we talk, and then at this time, when Ken tells us that he's not ready to start his own wrestling company yet, he has got somebody to buy in and bring in a show. Now, we won't get into the semantics of all that and what came about with that. We'll just say that Ken soon learned that going forward, it was better if he's going to continue to have wrestling in Cape, to do it with himself and with us versus having a third party bring it in.
So, a couple things we'll get to about this meeting and this. So about a year or so before that Comic-Con, I met a guy that was the ring announcer for Wrestling at the Chase for 25 years. His name was Larry Matisek. And Larry Matisek was really famous in the St. Louis area and anywhere that Wrestling at the Chase broadcasted through the late 60s, all through the 70s, and up till 83, I guess, when it went off the air. And I contacted him one day, just called him out of the blue. "Hey, I'm a fan from when you worked on TV. Can I buy you lunch?" And he said, "Yeah." So I drove to St. Louis on 2 occasions, and I had lunch with Larry Matisek. And we just simply talked the wrestling business in the 1970s and 80s when I was a kid. He was really nice. He had a couple books that I bought from him that he autographed. And I said, "Hey, I'm now at the point to where Cape Comic Con is 10 years old. 9 years old. And I wanted to put on a live wrestling, indie live wrestling show. Still knew nothing about indie wrestling. And Larry said, "My friend here in town is a promoter, and I believe he's licensed in Missouri and Illinois, both. He runs shows in Illinois." And I got to talking to him, and I bought a show. Right about the same time, I probably met Lee at his previous place of employment. And he came down, and he put on a show, just like Ed Schumann did, 9 years earlier. But it's what happened in those 5 months leading up to putting on that first wrestling show, or maybe the second wrestling show, where Lee and Jason and I, they stayed really close to me. and they listened to everything that was going on, and they were advising me, and Jason was on the phone booking talent if needed. They were all on standby. We had referees on standby. It was a great night, and I'm very appreciative of that night of wrestling. But like Lee said, I was bit then. I was bit by the bug, and there was no way I was going to have someone else come in and put on a wrestling show after this show. So the show came and went. Terry Funk, Bob Orton were in town for the Comic-Con and the wrestling show. They did not wrestle. Lee can tell you a lot about, and so could I, a lot about the St. Louis and Illinois side talent that came down to wrestle during the show. And at least a few of them became CCW talent roster wrestlers. But when that show ended, and because of the months leading up to that show, and the relationships I had with Lee and Jason, sure, I was bitten, and I really thought there were some cool things we could do, so I got a promoter's license. But to share with what Lee was saying, not only was I not going to do it on my own, but I'll say it, and I'm glad to say it. I really needed you two guys to get me through not only that weekend, but the promotion that we were going to build moving forward. So I'm really thankful for all that. And man, you guys were there every step of the way, kind of almost in the shadows, almost in the shadows of almost like running it from the side, kind of. You were there in a moment's notice if we needed anything as it related to this show. And there were times where we didn't know the show was going to, this guy going to be here, this guy not going to be here, what's it going to cost me in the end, all these kind of things.
Yep, I remember that. It was also, it was an interesting time. Should have taught Ken a couple of lessons. One, that me and him were going to butt heads quite frequently because he sent me some very hostile text messages the day of the show. He's shaking his head.
No, I'm just saying you got to refresh my memory, man.
So
the day of the show?
The day of the show.
All right.
Because I had a few plans that day.
Yeah, I remember.
So anybody that knows me,
I was mad.
Anybody that knows me knows that big friends, big fans of the band Fit for an Autopsy out of the Northeast. Shout out to Fit for an Autopsy. And they were doing a show that night over in St. Louis at Foo Bar. And I knew I needed to be there for that show. So I had plans for that. But I also still had plans to be there that day at the Comic-Con and all that fun stuff. Which, for anybody wondering, yes, Ken Murphy made me pay to get into the Cape Comic-Con. And then, so not only is he frustrated with me, he then charges me to go there. So that tells you what kind of person Ken is.
Ouch!
So anyways, we get there, and then first thing we do, go into a room, and Ken decides to host a Q&A session with Terry Funk and Bob Orton. If anybody out there is listening to this and decides that they want to bring in talent, get in the wrestling business, take my advice. Step one, don't book a Q&A with the wrestlers, because it can only end poorly. Do you remember this?
There were frustrating moments during that Q&A, for sure.
Yes, because the only people that would raise their hand and ask questions were people that shouldn't have been.
Fairly true. True. We did our best to get through it, but...
And then, on top of it, I, being the nice person that I am, instead of dragging this out more and boring the people there, I had one question for Terry Funk. And I held it until I got up there for the photo op, and my question was simple. Hey, Terry, what are your thoughts on them trying to revive FMW in Japan, and do you think it will be successful? Now, Terry, to his defense, who just had to listen to a bunch of people ask him if he was tougher than John Cena or can beat John Cena.
Legitimate question.
Legitimate questions that was asked. That's not a joke. So, I just asked him this. He's very excited because this is kind of what I feel like he agreed to come do a Q&A about, is to talk about things like wrestling in Japan and stuff like that. So now, Terry's ready to talk FMW. And of course, Ken Murphy says, This is not the time to ask questions.
We
gotta take the picture and move the light along.
Right, it was the photo op time.
Yes. I'm pretty sure I was towards the end of the line as well, so that makes it even better. So then, of course, Terry's like, just shakes his head at Ken and says, hey, just come out there and talk to me after this is done at the table. Okay. So, that ended up being another poor idea, because, of course, when I get out there to the table, Ken's friend, who was in charge of actually the licensed promoter for that show, did not like me being out there talking to Terry, and quite frankly brushed me off so I would hurry up and leave. So, needless to say, that was my first real experience dealing with Ken at a big time project that I still had to pay for.
I believe you used the term that I get I don't know, frustrated, I get flustered.
Yeah.
Probably.
We can have a whole podcast of just the emotions of Ken Murphy. So, after this show, the excitement in Cape Girardeau is growing that indie wrestling has the potential to come back to Cape Girardeau. Anybody that knows about the wrestling business in Missouri knows that it is very difficult to have wrestling here. You have to have a licensed promoter who's bonded, and the state at any time can raise the bond without a real notice. Each of your wrestlers have to have licensed blood work, physical, and there's so many state-required rules with wrestling that has to be followed, or the commission can shut your show down. Which is funny, because when people hear that, they think of what they see on TV when they have a commissioner. Well, I can tell you in the state of Missouri, the commissioner is quote-unquote a shoot or real, and is not a storyline gimmick.
Yeah, it's true, and that's been a challenge, part of our CCW journey from the beginning. It is quite a challenge here in the state of Missouri. Hey, I wanted to share a story with you, Lee. One of our friends, he's been to dozens of CCW shows. He was a customer at the comic book store I mentioned that I had, and again, he's an indie wrestling fan. Going back, again, I want to reiterate, didn't know a thing about indie wrestling through the 90s. So James Lentz, a shout out to you if you're out there. He and I were talking one day, and he said, something about going to indie wrestling shows. And I said, yeah, what are those, the small shows that take place in armories and gymnasiums or whatever. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I'd like to do that someday. Or we were just chatting about it. And when he explained to me that a good indie show, a good solid indie show is going to draw, 200 people, maybe 200 and change. I looked at him and I said, James, that's crazy. I said, I can't believe that. I don't even know how those numbers can hold true in a business model, and that can't be right. And he says, no, I'm sure of it. And so I scratched my head for years over that comment. And I still remember the conversation to this day. And, one of the biggest pieces of learning that we've had in CCW that Lee and Jason, I'm sure, already knew. But for me was how difficult it is to mobilize a fan base, keep it, and grow it. With what Lee said earlier, getting out and supporting independent live entertainment, music, stand-up, plays, death metal, wrestling. It's really difficult, and that's been one of the biggest challenges is trying to grow that audience from, again, those mid-200s. James, to this day, I brought that up with James more than once, and I appreciate his comments way back when, before there was a Cape Championship Wrestling, and I think about it more today, that what we're still trying to do and have a blast doing.
Definitely. And I mean, that's one of the things that I think I've mentioned to you time and time again, and some of the experiences we've had up and down the road here is, what does Cape Girardeau and Southeast Missouri support? We look at things and how the market changes. Let me start there. Because the way anybody that knows me or knows from this, before deep diving into CCW, people know that I was part of the St. Louis metal scene and things of that nature with Death by Metal and all that. Well, Cape had a thriving music scene in the 90s. Since then, that scene has really started to tinker off, And I know there are some great people out there working on trying to revive it. However, it still has a lot of work to get those numbers up. And with Cape being a college town, I think a lot of us here who want to get more involved with entertainment and bringing things, not just wrestling, not just concerts here, we've got scratching our heads trying to figure out, it's like, how can we do this? And be successful is one way, and anybody I've talked to doing this, the wrestling business, what we do at Cape Championship Wrestling, or anything we've done, it's about breaking even and being able to continue to the next event. Kind of like what you said earlier with Cape Comic Con, with you want to make sure you can pay the bills so that it continues to do it.
Right.
Because we can't continue to do anything if it doesn't break even.
Correct.
So that's what we're constantly working on, is getting that perfect model to where we can continue to do this, break even, and continue the shows month to month, but also not just break even as just the final point, break even and then go forward to build and build and build. And I think that's some of the things, like you can even look at the past companies that was here in not just Cape, but all throughout Southeast Missouri, and I would even say Southern Illinois as well. You look at the, 4 years now of doing with Cape Championship Wrestling, and you look at the talent that we've brought in here, some by great booking, some by just fluke of people feel sorry for us because they booked us one person, and that person couldn't make it, so they got replaced with somebody much better. So, we're lucky in that point, but we still, to this day, I don't say it's an everyday struggle, but it's always something that we're looking at as far as like how we can grow the model and how we can continue to get bigger and bigger and continue to support what we do here in Southeast Missouri. And I think that we're starting to see that now with not just having the show here in Cape, but taking the product on the road to Sykeston, taking it to Chaffee, to Delta, to Charleston. Shout out to Kyle Johnston if you're listening to this. He's been a great support down in the Charleston market, helping us getting in there, helping getting the word out, and we really appreciate that support there. And as always, if you're in a town and you've got a building or you're interested in Cape Championship Wrestling coming there, let us know. Shoot us a message, and let's see what we can work out to get there, because we're all very passionate about this product, and we're wanting to get it out to everybody. And if you can help us do that, we are much grateful and much appreciative of it.
Without question, for sure. So Lee, it takes us up to 4+ years of experience with Cape Championship Wrestling, and what's next? What's next has become a little bit more of my life over the last year. Cape Comic Con is, I'm again, Lee's so good about thanking, guys like Kyle Johnson and all of the people that have supported Cape Championship Wrestling over the years. Without that support on the shows that I put on outside of Cape Championship Wrestling, I don't know, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. I'd be doing other things with my time and not nearly as much fun. But I started thinking, once Cape Championship Wrestling became a stable event, a monthly event, 10 times a year, and we would do the big Super Show event with Cape Comic Con, and that continued to roll, I started looking at what was next. I put on my Twitter profile, promoter of events. Ken Murphy, promoter of events.
Which is a big step for Ken trying to figure out how Twitter works.
That's right. Oh yeah, it was a huge step. But I looked at, and I've had a lot of conversations with people. Lee, we've talked about, one of your favorites and the local area rap game, Jelly Roll. Mm-hmm. I told you very seriously. You're a fan. You've been to his shows before. You've seen what his shows look like. What do they look like here in Cape? Let's do something. My point is, I have a passion for bringing people together to enjoy events. I don't care if it's a chess tournament. I don't care if it's a really cool game of horseshoes. I don't care if it's stand-up comedy, death metal. maybe someday. We'll get into our differences here coming up. I know that's going to be part of this conversation. But I do. My passion over the last year.
We did now have a Hard Rock show, our first Super Show, Eve, with Final Drive and Eurydice. Not Eurydice, Eurydice.
Correct.
Shout out to those guys if you're listening. We did make the liner notes. No, Ken was ahead of me, which I don't know why. But that's neither here nor there. So we had that here. But let's go ahead before we get into the differences and stuff like that. You mentioned promoter of events.
Yeah.
And let's talk about some of these events. We've talked about Cape Comic Con. It's what anniversary is coming up in 2020?
15.
15 years of Cape Comic Con. So we have that. We have the monthly CCW events, including some of the big shows like the anniversary show, Homecoming, the big show, the Super Show with the conjunction of Cape Comic Con. Now we're looking at you just coming off your heels of a very successful Cape Anime Con.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. So that, again, with Cape Comic Con every April, that show obviously is made up of different pieces of pop culture and entertainment. Wrestling, comic books, science fiction, horror, etc. And I noticed that there was quite a few shows in the anime fandom in Memphis. Obviously, Nashville's a big city, but Memphis has got a couple of really strong shows, and St. Louis does. Well, I always feel like this is where we live. This is what we want to bring people out of their houses to go do things here. So, is there an interest and is there a market for an anime weekend in Cape? And after Comic-Con in April, I just had to believe the answer was yes. And I was then ready to start layering another event or two throughout the year. And the anime show, again, seemed to be the best choice. We had a really strong anime turnout in April with Veronica Taylor, who is big as Ash Ketchum in the long-running Pokemon anime. So we brought her to town, and the turnout was tremendous for her. So we had lunch, we had dinner one evening, she and I did, and my family, and from there I started getting the idea that after the dust settled and throughout some of the summer would get by us, and we would do our first anime con weekend, and it was September 23rd, 24th, throwing it out there, whatever. And it was at the arena. It was a big hit. So
pretty sure it's the 21st and 22nd. But for those of you listening out here, whichever weekend, the 21st, it had to be the 21st.
You were in a show, so tell us what show you went to that weekend, and you drove back 4 hours.
Yes. So for those that know, that's listened for knows I'm a big Deathmatch fan, and
that's right.
So I was in Chicago at the Summit Park Center for GCW NGI4 Nick Gage Invitational Tournament, which was an absolute blast. If you haven't seen it yet, make sure to check out Smart Mark Video to catch that replay, or catch it on Fight TV, where you can also not just see GCW, but you can also see CCW shows, including our first pay-per-view, CCW Super Show, on there. So make sure, if you didn't catch that, make sure you go to Fight TV and watch the Super Show on there as well.
Did I send you a nasty gram for missing the Anime Con?
No, you did not, because I actually showed up there.
You did, and I gave you a super shout-out for doing that.
Ken gave me a shout-out because I drove back from Chicago to Cape to make sure that I was at the inaugural Cape Anime Con. And let me tell you...
Did I put you to work when you got there? I probably did.
You did.
Yeah, of course I did.
You know, at least it was something, it was working the door for a little bit, which is something I had experienced.
Did I charge you to get in?
No, you did not charge me to get in. You just put me to work.
I've learned, you guys. I've learned the error of my ways.
He has. I was like, hey, I want to get a picture with such and such there. And he's like, well, tough luck.
Did they leave?
I know, and that you don't remember. The arrangement that they had. They were not about comps, if you remember correctly.
No, they were not.
So we'll just leave it at that. They were not about comps, and I was not a big enough fan to pay $20 for a photo Which, I mean, if you're a big fan, that's a great deal. That's the one thing that I can really... Well, that's not the one thing I can say. It's one of the big things I like to tell people about any of the events through either CCW or Cape. Any of the Cape Cons that come through is everything is reasonably priced. I know as far as like CCW goes, anytime we bring in a guest there, we try to keep the meet and greets at a reasonable price so everybody can afford it. And everybody can bring their family out and get to meet it. We try to work and accommodate with people in this just to make sure that they get the best experience with it. We're not like some of the bigger shows and cons and stuff like that where they charge an astronomical amount just because it is a con or a big show. I know I can't speak. I don't want to say names on here, but there was a certain convention I went to a few weeks ago in Chicago, and some of the talent that they had there, we had that same talent here. And I can tell you to meet that talent there was about 3 to 4 times the cost of what it was to meet at the at Cape's events, whether it's the WrestleCon or the Cape Con or the Cape Wrestling shows. Which reminds me, you still owe me like $11 for that homicide picture that you messed up.
Man, I do. No, I thought about your dinner or
Did
lunch.
you?
Yeah, dinner or lunch. But I could probably still come up with the $11.
See, I don't remember that.
Yeah, the homicide picture, that was classic.
But anyway,
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the things, and like I said, you know, we try to put out a great value here, and I made it there, wanted to show you some support, show you some
Absolutely,
love on
I appreciated it.
I walked in there, once Ken got done working me, I got to walk around and look at some of the stuff there, some great vendors, stuff like that. Not necessarily anything I really knew too much about, but hey, that's the great thing about conventions. You can go there, it's super affordable to get into, you can support local business, learn about new things. You may find something that you like. You may find something that you don't like. But hey, that's life.
Yeah, you talked about the price points, again, whether it's CCW or some of the other events that we put on here in the area. It is absolutely all about the entertainment, the entertainment for your dollar. You have lots of choices. The movie theater is open 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's right at, anywhere from $5 to $10 to $11 to see a movie. So you always got to take those things into consideration when people start talking about getting out and getting out of the house and going to do something live, something interactive, something to see or do or experience. You mentioned the experience. And I think we've done a really good job at that. We get a lot of thank yous for that. We understand where we live. And I don't mean that as in any way. I mean, I choose to live here. I choose to raise a family here. I choose not to go anywhere else. And in doing so, no, we're not going to be able to charge $100 to get into a Comic Con. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
Photo ops aren't going to be $100 in Cape Girardeau. And that's okay. That's a choice we make, and we make it happily because we think that we get a chance to open those doors to a lot more fans, friends, families, things like that.
So now, from the success of Cape Anime Con, you run in, actually you run into, that's not the exact right word, you go into now another new con, Cape Fear Con, which is a horror convention, which the joke is always anytime I tell anybody this, I have to specify with my southern accent, it's horror with an H, not horror with a W.
Correct. And again, I think now we have hit on a sweet spot with Big Lee and Big Lee's World.
That's right.
Man, he's a fan of death metal, death matches, and horror.
That is correct. I believe that's also in my Twitter profile or Instagram profile, which you can follow both at BigLee756 on Twitter and Instagram. Got to get that cheap plug in there.
Important.
It is. So let's talk about Cape Fear Con coming up October 18th, October 19th at the Osage Center in Cape Girardeau, Missouri.
I did know those dates.
You did? Okay,
I did.
Perfect.
Lee and everyone, now this was, we do, Lee and I and Jason do business with the city of Cape Girardeau, along with our friends down in Chaffee, Sykeston, Delta, in Charleston. But we our facilities that we run in here in Cape Girardeau, and a shout out to Tony Weatherby and Penny and Scott Williams. They rent us these buildings, the historic AC Brazi Arena building for our CCW, and that's where Cape Anime was. And then the Osage Center on Kings Highway is where Cape Comic Con has been housed the last 8 or 9 years. So I was meeting with them, and we were discussing CCW calendars for 2019 and 2020. We were discussing the upcoming anime show. And Scott said to me, Ken, we have a very successful haunted house that runs 3 weekends in October and Halloween night. Would you consider putting on a companion piece like you do with Cape Comic Con and like I think you have planned for Cape Anime Con on one of those weekends? Well, Scott and Penny and Tony have been really good to me, and I couldn't pass up the idea of the city and I. It's a co-promotion in that we are trying to bring people out of the house and to the community from the surrounding communities these weekends for all of the reasons why cities thrive. Restaurants, local business, anything brick and mortar that brings revenues to our city is really important. So Scott and Penny were like, hey, can you help add value to our haunted houses? And in turn, we will promote your horror event. Man, it didn't take me 15 minutes to say, yeah, I'm in. Now, I got a lot going on this fall. We have CCW to finish up the calendar year 2019. But we found a day on the calendar at the Osage Center, and we got to work. We got to work, and we have the infrastructure, thank goodness, through Cape Comic Con over 15 years. And I'm really excited. We've got some really cool guests.
You got some big guests coming in.
Yeah.
So let's start at the top here. Let's start at Scout Taylor Compton.
Yeah, Lee, you were good enough to explain to me that the Rob Zombie Halloween films are well supported and they're a nice piece to the franchise. And I started looking into the lead female role, and she was available, and it was a no-brainer once she was available. Again, late notice, trying to put together a good guest list for the entertainment dollar for the fan. And I grabbed it as quickly as I could, and I think you endorsed that.
Yes, when you sent me the list of people that was available, I believe she was my top pick off of that list. For those of you listening who are unsure, Scout Taylor Compton was Lori on the Halloween that the Rob Zombie remade, and Lori was the sister of Michael Myers, who he did not kill at the beginning of the movie. She was also Joan Jett, I believe, in The Runaways.
Right.
So,
no, she was the other one. Lita Ford.
Was she Lita Ford?
Yeah, she was Lita. Well, now you're gonna make me second guess, but I think she was. I think Timex Seabaugh. Shout out to Timex, Cape Girardeau rock legend. I believe he told me she was Lita, but now I don't take it from me.
She may have been.
Okay, very good. Didn't mean to.
We're recording this. It's like 8:35 at night, so it's past my bedtime. So
and mine. So
with that, that's a big get. That's a big get for Cape, because Cape, to me, like, for the guests that him come in, like I said earlier, like, big horror fan. So to have a big horror guest come in, that's a good get for Cape. Now, the more controversial pick, I should say controversial pick. The original announcement caused a little bit of controversy, and then it was a wild ordeal.
Yeah.
So the second pick that you had come in,
so
wrestling legend Raven,
ECW original Raven, and Lee again. I do want to discuss some of these things you brought up earlier about us.
He was the first wrestler to have a action figure by all four of the big promotions.
That's amazing. So yeah, again. Lee and I aren't the only people to run indie wrestling in a 200-mile radius. I'm not the only person to put on any type of fan con in a 200-mile radius. Competition for talent is not easy. These people get booked up. Halloween, there's only 4 weekends in October, and everyone wants to wants the best possible guest they can get for a Halloween type horror event, and we do what we can with our budget. What we know we're going to try to make back at the box office, and we wanted to have a guest in the hardcore theme to match our CCW show on the 19th of October at the Osage Center. So we booked Raven, and the agent took my deposit, and he signed off that Raven would be in town October 19th. So I announced it. Come to find out, Raven had booked himself at another event in the South, same day. That promoter took exception to my advertisement, thought that the advertisement I put out there was misleading, false, and that I was doing harm to his event by posting misleading and false news. I ignored him for about an hour, and then I said to him when I finally addressed him, it's my understanding through this agent that Raven has accepted my deposit and he will be in town October 19th. And he said, well, you know, this is a private conversation and we tried to conduct ourselves as gentlemen and professional. And he just said, I'm sorry, but that won't be the case. And I learned a few hours later or the next morning that Raven indeed would not be coming to Cape Girardeau, Missouri. So I made a retraction. I made a retraction that I felt was honest, clear, and professional, that Raven would not be coming to Cape. I apologize for any misleading advertisement on my part, and I deleted the post. Mm-hmm. We started looking. Lee started looking. Jason started looking. We started trying to figure out who the next option would be. And Lee, did we not go through some really cool possibilities?
We did.
We went through some big names and some big possibilities, and we came close on 3 or 4 of them.
I heard you had a panic attack when I suggested Jack.
Mild. Mild heart palpitations. I've grown and I've learned and I've become appreciative of some of the hardcore wrestlers of the 90s and 2000s. So I know he has a place in this business, and I know he draws a crowd. But he has not been my first choice since we started CCW. So
although it came to a point that it's almost going to have to be.
So guys, listen, yeah. Have we scrambled to the past for guests? Absolutely. Will I continue to scramble if we run shows and events? No question. And
it's the nature of the business.
It is. And as I posted right before the video, sometimes you have to let things play out. And what played out was that show that he was legitimately scheduled for, in the South on the same day, postponed their event. And he called us and said, guys, I'm available. And we said, okay, let's do it.
I heard a rumor that you bullied the other promoter and got him to move his show.
So I have the transcripts. I have the messages back and forth. He and I off thread. He and I conducted ourselves like gentlemen. No bullying of any kind took place.
That's why I wasn't allowed to talk to him.
And he legitimately did. Let me say it one more time. He legitimately did have Raven booked on the 19th, as he said he did at the time.
And Ken wouldn't let me talk to him.
No, I had that one. I got it.
So, you got Raven.
We do.
You got Scout Compton.
I do.
Now, rumor is, I heard that you announced the other day the biggest guest you've ever had at a convention.
That is 100% true. His agent reached out to me. We negotiated hardball negotiations, and I am proud to announce that Big Lee Montgomery and Big Lee's World makes his horror convention debut at Cape FearCon. So I'm excited to have you, man. I know you're going to meet the fans. I know you're going to talk podcasting. You're going to have I'm just excited to have you. I know you love horror.
I do.
Yeah.
Anybody knows that if you come talk to me, I'll talk to you about just about anything. Whether I know about it or not, or if I like it or not, I'll still talk to you about it. It will be kind of hard. I shouldn't say kind of hard. It'll be kind of weird to be at a convention of yours or at something of yours where I'm not working the front door.
So funny you should mention that.
Ken's going to say, his booth is going to be right at the front door when you come in.
So I had Lee pegged to handle Raven throughout the weekend, and now he's got his own business to worry about. So Raven will be handled by someone else. But no, Lee, I won't. You're an exhibitor. That's what you are. No work. Lee does no work for me that weekend.
I don't know. I hear exhibition gets you in trouble these days.
You're an exhibitor.
That's right. And like I said, I will be there Saturday, October the 19th. I will miss the first day because I will be down in Memphis. Like we talked about on the last episode, I will be down there for JC's event, Pro Wrestling Trainwreck Southern Sickness Cup 2019 at the High Tone. It'll be a 2-day festival, a 2-day deathmatch tournament. I will be there for night 1. However, I will be back at Cape FearCon on that Saturday. I'll be making the drive back. As if anybody will tell you, like Ken does, Ken knows I'm not afraid to put in the miles to make events.
Now he puts in the miles. He supports what he loves, and he supports it with his time. He puts it over on his podcast, as you've heard him do now for the past hour or so, and he attends them, and he attends the shows.
Well, I've told you this off the air or on a text message before. It's like, I will say this, to not toot my own horn, but of all the guests that you have, I do feel like I promote your event the hardest.
I have no doubt.
You know, whether it be I have invested interest in it or just that, it's something that I'm really passionate about as far as, like I said, with both the wrestling and the horror aspect of it. So, like I said, I'm really excited to be there, and then I hope, like it has the success of Cape Comic Con and Cape Anime Con, that this becomes a yearly event.
I appreciate that, Lee. And that is the goal. Just to be clear, when I start booking these events and I start talking to advertisers or investors, they want to know, is this a one and done? It took us a while for everyone to take Cape Championship Wrestling as a monthly event. It took 3 or 4 years for people to buy in that Cape Comic Con that I was invested in it over the long haul. I may have to spread these events out a little bit. I don't know about this whole September-October thing back to back.
Yeah, that seems a little rough.
Yeah, and Halloween's not changing its month anytime soon. So I don't know what the future holds for the dates and the months. Cape Comic Con will be in April. If we are fortunate enough and we have the support to continue on with Cape Fear, that event will probably be in October. So the anime show might need to find a new month, but we shall see. Lee, I'm going to go ahead and start it because I feel like there's no better time and no better place than right here at Big Lee's World to say this and talk a little bit about our relationship.
Okay.
Without question, I am old enough to be your dad.
Yep.
So you've never made me feel like the out of touch older guy. Mm-hmm. You've always treated me like a peer, and I appreciate that. You talk about putting people over, and you talk about sharing your passions and interests. You've done that time and time again tonight, and you've done that time and time again with me over the past 5 years, and I could never tell you how much I appreciate you, your family, and your family's support, and as my business partner, I could not have made a better choice, and I thank you for that. Our differences are really, if there's ever a model, and I won't get too sappy, if there's ever a model of people that can really find not just common ground, but like a binding, a bond, it's Lee and I. Yeah, nothing screams death metal about me. 20 years older than you, didn't know a thing about indie wrestling 5 years ago, don't know a whole lot much more about it now. And I joke, I just love CCW. So I like putting on the indie shows. And whether it's social, whether it's political, we come at each other from, I grew up in St. Louis. Lee grew up south of
the Boot Hill.
The Boot Hill area.
But sometimes it feels like the Slayer deal, south of heaven.
But I've never felt that the best part about it is I've never felt that those differences, way more stronger friendship than any differences. The differences are just fun to talk about. They really are. I've learned, listen, I know the name of, 10 death metal bands that I had never heard of, to include Jelly. I would have never heard of Jelly until I met you, and other important things as well.
Well, see, and that's the thing is, like, honestly, if you look at the two of us and how different we're on the spectrum of a lot of things, I think they should just put us running the government.
Yeah.
We're the perfect example of two opposite types of people who can work together and get things done. We do have we do have a couple of same similarities. We both seen Barry Manilow live.
Absolutely.
Not by necessarily my choice, but
I'm not so sure about that.
An offer I couldn't refuse.
And I'm on record as saying we'll attend a Pops show or a Fubar show, and I don't take that away. I'm not pulling that off the table. We're going to do it.
Yep. Got a Fubar show coming up in November.
Okay.
And it's on a Sunday.
How about that? Who's going? Who's playing?
We're looking at Acacia Strain, Spite, Left.
Yeah, I know Acacia Strain. Yeah, right.
Ken's like, I got no.
No, I do. I promise you, I do. I wouldn't lie about that.
Ken's like, wait, I seen that horrible stuff you posted on Facebook.
For sure.
That's what that was.
Yeah, I'll tease you about it a little bit.
Yeah, so we have that, and, anytime we get together, it's always good to talk about our different views on wrestling, politics. Ken's a big NWA mark. I'm a big deathmatch mark, which I will tell. I kind of told him the other day. I did check out the new episode of, well, I guess it's the only episode out right now of the NWA Power when you're listening to this on October 10th. We recorded it. So, and I was a big fan of it. It did take me back to my childhood, of course, where I grew up at. NWA, WCW was the big-time wrestling. It was the only wrestling we got for the most part down there. So, just to see back with that NWA logo, the studio-style wrestling, was a big throwback to when I was a kid. And plus, they did bring in two of my favorites, Homicide and Eddie Kingston. So that was a big draw for me. And I'm really, like I said, I'm really excited. I know somebody had mentioned this once before. And I don't remember if it was on a podcast or one of the, panels we did at Cape Comic Con this past year. Was why didn't Billy Corgan recognize that we had the NWA title defended here? And I mentioned that to him back in January when I had a chance to meet him down in Clarksville, Tennessee. And when I was talking to him about it, to say that he didn't really have that big of an interest in hearing what I had to say was one thing, but he really did not seem like he was really aware of it. So hopefully, I don't want to say that. Well, on my end, I can say, like, I'm indifferent in doing business with him in the NWA. Again, I know that's something that's on your books, is you would love to do a show with Corgan in the NWA here.
Right.
It's kind of like...
Or St. Louis.
Well, or St. Louis, yeah.
And I know that sounds contradictory to what I said about living here and promoting events here locally. I don't take that back. Growing up in the 70s, the NWA, to me, screamed St. Louis. It's just... we call it the crown jewel. Yeah, we're a little, pretentious maybe, but we felt like other cities, we felt like St. Louis was their home for about 25 years, and I want Billy Corgan to acknowledge that one time. And if it takes me and some others in the city of St. Louis to push that forward, we're going to try. Or absolutely would love to not only have the NWA title again, but Billy Corgan and the NWA here in Cape Girardeau, yes.
So does it kill your soul now that the NWA's came back? I've been to an NWA show and you haven't yet?
No, it killed me when you went to, the one where you met, when you had the meet and greet with Aldis and Corgan and all of them.
Yeah.
Yes, the answer is yes. I've reached out to Dave Lagana a few times. He's responded. Mm-hmm. But not very interested, I would say. But then again, I've got to make a much bigger pitch. If the NWA talent can still take indie bookings, and Jason sees that it's a good fit for us, we could talk about bringing some of their talent back. You mentioned, I think, Eli Drake, and I think you mentioned Homicide and
Eddie Kingston.
Lee, again, we butted heads, and I was very unsure about some talent you talked about, but when the time came and Homicide and Hernandez...
He's referring to Homicide.
I am. And when the time came to get Homicide and Hernandez here together, and Hernandez by himself, man, it was
good business.
Yes, it was good business, and it made us... They were good for us. Mm-hmm. They were good for us, and it was good business for CCW. And I expect the same for Raven. And I know you're excited about Raven.
I am excited about Raven. I actually saw my DVDs from the TNA collection that he did that I plan to get autographed when he's here. So I'm pretty excited for that. And that's one of the things that me and Ken and I talk about a lot going back and forth is kind of our different views on things. Kind of mine's more on the extreme side of things. And kind of like what I'd like to do and where I'd like to see CCW go and some of the adventures. I still want us to run a show on the East Cape side. That's a whole nother level of things that we can do and a set of talent that we can bring in. So I'd still like to work on that. However, some of the negotiations have been put to a halt on that due to some changes and things of that, of management, of the people that want to run those buildings out there. So once we can get something maybe worked out with them over there, I would definitely want to run a show maybe not just a CCW show, but a more extreme style hardcore show. Because I think like you're starting to notice, because Ken accepts everybody's Facebook friend requests, whether he knows them or not. The fact that Ken's not maxed out on his friend request yet just amazes me. I think he can start to see that our fan base is not just wanting regular traditional wrestling. There's a big draw now to a more extreme, hardcore, oriented style of wrestling, and a more extreme, violent, ultra-violent style. So I definitely think that that's something that going towards, hopefully, I would like to do it by the end of the year. However, that's rolling pretty close. So probably at 2020, I'd definitely like to revisit all of this and get that deal worked out to where we can run on the Illinois side. So with that being said...
Are you going to put me on the spot? He's going to put me on the spot.
No, I'm not going to put you on the spot. What I'm going to say is this. If this somehow gets to one of the people that works for the state of Missouri, this is a message for you. If I can get a deal worked out over in Illinois to where I can have shows ran there, yes, we would start running more shows over there and less on the Missouri side of Cape. Yes, that is a loss of revenue for the state of Missouri for what we have to do. Therefore, what I'm saying is if this gets to somebody in the state of Missouri, athletic commission or whatever, let's work on something to where we can get some laws changed into Missouri so we won't be tempted to go across the river 3 or 4 miles and do business there.
I'm willing to talk about it. So I went from my eyes completely shut 4 years ago and telling Lee it would not be for me to 4 years later respecting a lot of the wrestling forms that I didn't know enough about, was ignorant to, or didn't respect. And I want to support Lee, and I do see the benefits of running a show with the freedoms on the Illinois side. I'm willing to talk about loosening the Missouri state regulations. Not really a leader when it comes to petitioning government bodies, but do I think the Missouri State Sports, the Missouri Athletic Commission in Jeff City is extremely repressive. Guys, we can't do a lot of things that we want to do and that we know you'd want to see. We cannot do them. And it's very, very difficult.
Let's call a spade here.
It's very difficult.
The Athletic Commission puts these restrictions and stuff on to make money.
Right.
They would make more money if they took it off. So calling a spade here would be saying that the state of Missouri apparently does not want to make more money. Because here's the thing, personally, I don't care about the license, the blood work, the promoters. I don't care about that. To me, they can keep that. I like the idea of blood work. And the fact that you may not know is that a lot of the big deathmatch tournament people, or big deathmatch tournament promoters, they require their guys to get blood work done.
Makes sense.
Because they still want to be, while it's still an extreme style, they still want to make sure there's some sort of safety that can be for something that may or may not be caught or something like that. They want to have the best, and they don't want anything to be tampered with disease or anything like that.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that. I would say, and you know this, I'm preaching to the choir when I look at Lee and talk about this, to put on a professional wrestling event when you are in the relationship of combat sports and you can't do full combat. You can't take wrestling outside of the ring into the crowd. Any blood whatsoever, and you immediately go to a finish. We can go on and on with the restrictions, and they're tough. They're tough for fans. There's so many fans that want more, and I can appreciate that.
Why is it that every other, when you fill out that permit each month, why is it that it's like $25 for a permit for every combat sport except wrestling, which then becomes like $150? Why does it jump so much for? Those are the questions I want answered. And then the things about going into the crowd and stuff like that, why the state doesn't allow it if you're outside of the ring for too long. If you go back to, I tell the story all the time, if you go back to one of our first Cage Chaos shows and you catch some of the right video, you will see me go and scream at Jeff Odell and Roger that they have to take this back in the cage because the commission's getting ready to shut the show down because they're spending too much time outside of the ring.
We brought one of your favorites. We brought Madman Pondo.
We did bring him.
And he wanted to bring weapons to the ring, just a ringside gimmicks. He wanted to bring them, and it would be part of our wrestling event. And they shut that down hard.
I'll never forget the commissioner came in like, here I'm starving all day. I'm hungry.
Long days of work. Long days of work.
Ken for going to Burger King and getting me something to eat, even though he took forever to do it.
I'm good about that.
He went to get me some Burger King. He brought it back. I literally just sat down to eat. Pondo had came in with the baseball bat with the saw blade on it.
Yeah.
We're a few hours away from the show starting. There's no fans here or anything like that. So he's just carrying it in with the rest of his gear, not thinking anything about it. I'm not thinking anything about it. Here comes the commissioner, getting ready to start eating. He comes and stops me and says, you need to go tell Pondo he's got to go put that back in his car. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? And he's like, he can't have the saw blade out here. It's like, yeah, he's not going to use it in the match. Yeah, I don't care. He don't need to have it in the building. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
But like
3 hours before the matches start.
Like I said, though, we can go like 15 hours talking about this, but what I want to get to is we did have a couple of fan-submitted questions.
Oh, let's hear them.
For Ken Murphy. First off, we're going to start with Caleb Carter.
Shout out to Caleb Carter.
Shout out to Caleb Carter for doing match graphics for us. If you're listening to this, I hope you are, considering you asked a question. Hopefully at least see if we answered the question.
He's my favorite Joey Ryan lollipop fan.
Lollipop liquor.
Lollipop liquor.
Okay. Caleb Carter says, who is your dream person to bring in, whether it be for a Comic-Con or a wrestling event? I think I can answer that pretty easy. The guest he wanted to bring in the most is actually going to be there October the 19th at the Osage Center in Cape Girardeau, Missouri for Cape Fear Con, and that is your boy, Big Lee from Big Lee's World.
That is absolutely correct. Caleb, your question has been answered. However, if it was someone other than Big Lee Montgomery from Big Lee's World,
he can't think of anybody. It doesn't get bigger than that.
I would say so I'm going to give you two answers because one's from the wrestling side and one is from the Comic-Con side. If I could bring Dory Funk Jr. along with Terry Funk together to Cape Cape Championship Wrestling, the Super Show, any event at all, they would be my two, but they'd have to come together.
Do they even like one another?
Yeah, sure. They do. What have you read?
Oh, no, I was just asking. I didn't know. You know how families are in wrestling.
No, you're right. No, they're good, I think. From the Comic-Con side, man, that's a tough one. But I'll put the businessman's hat on, and I think for drawing the biggest crowd because she doesn't do Comic-Cons. So I would be the luckiest one to kind of win the lottery to have her. And I think she'd draw a great crowd. That would be Linda Carter, who played Wonder Woman on television from 73 to 77.
Why does she not do Comic-Cons?
You know, I don't know. I can't answer that. Jamie Lee Curtis does one a year. One, and it's for charity. All the money she makes, it's in Los Angeles, so she doesn't leave home. It's a horror con, right? And she does one a year, and apparently the money that she asks for an appearance fee and signing and blah, 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 all goes to a children's charity. So one a year, Jamie Lee Curtis. Pretty cool.
Yeah,
you
should tell her you do a second charity for her and do it that way.
Yeah. But I guess that's my answer, Caleb. Caleb, there's a long list of cool people out there I'd love to have in Cape Girardeau, but
not as cool as Big Lee from Big Lee's World.
Number one.
You know what my favorite Jamie Lee Curtis movie is?
Don't tell me it's that weird aerobics movie she did with John Travolta.
No.
Good.
Freaky Friday.
Yeah.
Her and Lindsay Lohan. I always had a huge crush on Lindsay Lohan.
I thought Lindsay Lohan was going to be this huge star. Yeah. I'm talking like A-list huge star.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, though. You think that, and your demons get the best of you.
Yeah, it's tough out there.
But it sounds like she's on the right path now, so hopefully we can see more and more from her.
My kids were big fans. All the best. And a shout out to Lindsay Lohan.
Shout out to Lindsay Lohan, who, if you're listening to this, hit up them DMs.
Right.
They'll be open for you.
Right.
So, I want to know who this person is that asked this question.
Yeah.
Because when they posted it, I looked it up, and I didn't know who they were. And it looks like, it said they only had like one friend on here. So I don't...
Of course I friended him. I friended him, of course.
Actually, I don't think he did.
Oh, my gosh.
Who's Tony DeVito?
Yeah. He's a guy that I've just met through putting on the horror show, and he's commenting a lot. I don't know.
Okay, because I didn't know if it was like a joke profile or...
What Tony have to say?
Well, here's what made me think it was a joke profile. His question was, when is he bringing Ernie Hudson to Cape Con?
Okay, so everyone, I would say the joke behind that question is Lee and Jason have been pitching Ernie Hudson for 3 years. However, they've been pitching Tony Todd.
There you go.
So, folks, when Tony Todd makes his historic arrival in Cape Girardeau someday, it will be because Jason and Lee have pitched him to me for years, and I don't doubt he would be a great guest. Shout out to the LA Hustlers.
Shout out to Bradley.
Shout out to Bradley, the LA Hustlers.
If he's listening to this,
Tony
Man's coming soon enough.
He is coming. I just don't know when. 2020? 2021?
Let's make it happen 2020.
All right.
But you still didn't answer the question.
Ernie Hudson?
Yeah.
Yeah, he ain't coming.
That's the guy from Ghostbusters, right?
It is.
Okay.
I love Ernie Hudson. I say he ain't coming. He might. I mean, I'm sure I've had an agent pitch him once or twice. He's iconic. No disrespect to no one. He just hadn't been on my radar.
What did he do besides Ghostbusters? If you don't know, that's fine because I don't either. That's why I was asking.
I could dig him up on some things he's done, but that's his most notable role.
So the other question is questions I've asked you multiple time and time again. A guy by the name of Andy Borders.
That's my blood. That's my wife's blood. We're blood by marriage, if that's a thing. It's my wife's cousin.
I'm about to say, I think that's something else.
I love Andy. What do you got to say?
That name sounds really familiar.
He's been to a few CCW shows.
His question is, are we ever going to see an all-wrestling convention come to Cape? Old wrestling guys, new guys, and maybe a couple matches. Make it happen, Ken.
Andy Borders, or as my friend Lee says, shout out to my cousin by marriage, who I consider family, Andy Borders. The answer to your question, and I've had this asked of me quite often, yes. It is absolutely going to happen.
Look at this.
God willing.
Breaking news here at the Big Leagues World Podcast.
Yeah. So what else is on my list? God willing that we're all going to be around to enjoy this. A full weekend of wrestling, guests, autographs, photo ops, and a live indie show. Yes. I mean, ask me all the questions you want. The answer is yes. It's happening. 2020 maybe.
2020?
2020 maybe. But it's happening. Lee, you know it's been Lee knew the answer because we've talked about it for 3 years now.
Yeah.
Easy.
I don't know. Like, I think we should kind of shoot for maybe the anniversary show.
Love it. Love it.
Since you're that'll kind of add another con in that little role of April
and
Comic Con, September.
And 5 years is kind of a landmark.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5 years anniversary show, landmark, summer 2020. Obviously, that will be I want my partners in CCW involved in that, obviously. So we just need to get together and start hammering it out, but I'm ready to sign off on that. We've been talking about it now for long enough, and for sure something I want to do. Andy, also I thought you might ask, will I ever promote a live rock show? I know you're a rock and roll fan. Hard rock as well, hard metal. Love to someday for sure. I think that'll happen as well. One night, bring a couple bands in, 3 bands, just have a fun evening of it.
Yeah. We usually have a open arena building.
We do business there.
So, but I mean that's the thing though. Like you said, we've we've tinkered a lot and I should say a lot. We've tinkered a little bit in it. There's not too many wrestling promoters out there that could say that they've not just put on one concert, they put on two. Because we also had the Jeff Hardy band.
Man, thank you for Lee. There's things that I just kind of forget about. That was no little deal. That was, and we had a nice crowd. And Jeff Hardy, he is a clear superstar in the industry of wrestling over 25 years. And he came to Cape Girardeau, Missouri for us, and him and his band, and they put on a great show. He did a 30-minute podcast, 100 people on a meet and greet, and then performed for 150 people. It was great.
And he didn't rush the meet and greet. That was
it was a 4-hour deal, from start to finish.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know that was one of the big concerns with him coming in is, how rushed would the podcast, or not the podcast, how rushed would the meet and greet be? And he took his time. He even said, hey, he had to go to the bathroom in the middle of it, and he's like, hey, I gotta go to the bathroom. We're going to get through all these people. I just need to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, okay, cool. So we take him down to the bathroom, and he finished out super nice with everybody. So with that, what's in the future for Ken Murphy? You buying a new car anytime soon?
Well, I'll be walking. Either I buy a new car or I'll be walking. I'll be the guy that you'll see, on Kings Highway walking, and you'll be like, that's Ken Murphy. So, yes. The answer to that is yes.
Because I thought you was getting one after the Comic Con.
So I still have, I still have a home to keep up and some children that aren't quite on their own yet. So we didn't put that money toward a new car for Ken yet. It's coming. What's it going to be? Who knows? I'm a little bit past. I like something nice and new, but I don't know. Probably nothing real fancy.
See, that's the thing with this generation coming up that they don't understand is, like, they want something that looks nice and fancy, but they don't care whether or not it's fully reliable and things of that nature. And I've said from the get-go, it's like, I'll drive whatever as long as it runs. It's safe and it runs.
You research your new car?
Yes.
Absolutely. And I find that so respectful. That's
even though I was put in a situation where I had to have one.
Damn wrestling company.
Right. For those of you who don't know, we were doing a show down back in January in Charleston.
Yeah, first Charleston.
And we went down that Friday for setup and everything, and it had just snowed and icing. Made it down there no problem. And on the way back, I was driving on 55, and there was a board that was buried underneath some snow, and when my car hit it, it just slid and smashed into a guardrail. And, so needless to say, besides everything else, I definitely needed to get a new car, and made sure that still made it to CCW the next night.
Sure did.
Trust me, it wasn't by choice, because I did not, let me tell you, that was one of the shows I did not want to be at, but... Yeah. Shout out to Mama Montgomery. She came all the way up here to pick me up to make sure that I made it to that show, and that I went and got my old truck from back home after that, so I'd have something to drive until I could find a new car.
I'm going to take it all back. Big Lee's World is not my favorite guest. Mama Big Lee would be my favorite guest at any show I ever ran. Big Lee's mother. Shout out to Big Lee's mom.
Yep, shout out to Mama Montgomery. She's one of the best out there.
She's one of the best. So you ask about what else. I'll share a little bit of 2020 with you. I have a daughter graduating from SEMA with her master's degree. I have a son graduating from high school, both in 2020. And Starbucks, that I hope to finish out a nice career with over the next 10 years or so. Starbucks will be opening one, if not two, company stores in the area in 2020.
They're going to put more stores in Cape?
In the area.
You mean like Southeast Missouri, or you mean like Cape, or down the street? They can put like next door.
That's not. That's not. So
we're needing exclusives here.
I thought that was in the Southeast Missouri area.
Because we got a couple of people in here that loves their Starbucks.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm glad. Starbucks has been great to me.
So Ken always takes care of me when I go in there.
Yeah.
I go in there, I tell him I want a Dr. Pepper.
Yep, look at him like he's crazy.
He tells me to leave,
right,
and then I leave.
For sure, yeah.
And I go to the gas station across the street and get a Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, and comes back in and visits with me.
Although I will tell the story one time I went in there and saw Ken, and Ken almost caused me to have a heart attack because he did not explain to his non-coffee drinking friend that, what did I have? It was like a strawberry
I don't remember.
frappuccino or something. Whatever. It didn't have coffee, but it had a bunch of whatever energy, whatever's in
Yeah.
coffee.
No, you had a strawberry refresher, which is a ton of green coffee extract and caffeine.
Yes.
Yes,
And
that's what
I was not expecting that.
No, that's an energy drink.
Yes. And needless to say, when I went back to work that day, I was bouncing off the walls. But I will say, once it wore off, I did sleep pretty well.
Good deal.
But yeah, like I said, it's been an exciting adventure doing business with Ken Murphy. Good times, bad times.
Yep.
I was going to say, how's the song? What was it?
Good times and bad times.
I know I've had my share.
Yeah.
I don't know the original, but
Right.
I know the cover that Godsmack did.
Okay. Well, I would say this, and I hope this is maybe one of the best things I can say about doing business with Lee, and that is I've grown. I've grown a lot as a person, and I thank him for that because he's a big part of that.
And Ken knows he's got somebody that does the nasty jobs that he doesn't want to have to do.
Oh, sadly I've cowered from a few jobs,
including talking to some people that
yeah.
he's not comfortable talking with.
Well, I sound really soft. I just thought Lee would be much better. Hey, listen. Lee. So Lee's a tremendous businessman. Lee understands top line sales. He understands profit and loss. And Lee does make a lot of more tougher decisions with CCW financially than I ever wanted to take on with it. For sure.
It's just because I'm meaner.
Well, you're stronger.
I'm uglier.
No.
That's what it does, see.
No.
I show up to these people and I'm like, hey, this needs to happen.
And they, okay, pay up. No.
Yep, pay up. This is the shakedown portion.
Or some agent gets sideways on us and acts like he's not returning my deposit from a said indie worker last show that I was just enamored with bringing to Cape Girardeau. And they had my deposit, and Lee was instrumental in saying, someone's getting that deposit back, me or you, which one's it going to be? So,
and look at that, Ken got it back.
I did. I got it back. So, but you got to stay after him. You got to at least got to coach me through some of this stuff.
Ken had to have that hard life lesson at that time of Ken's very enamored to bring this person in. However, if he wants to stay in good graces with those people, he had better take care of it before I have to get involved.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, they were choosing to burn a bridge that they could care less whether it was there or not. I was not.
Right.
And you said, hey, it's going to get burnt really quick if we don't get their deposit back.
It was kind of one of those things. Those people didn't care about burning a bridge with Ken.
Right.
I didn't care about burning a bridge with them people.
No, not at all.
And Ken's like, whoa.
Can't we just make this work out? Can't we just all get this figured out?
And we did. And we did. With a can of gas and the matches. And I'm just ready. I'm like, I don't care if we have to do this through email or show up in St. Louis. I was going to say something a whole lot worse, but I was like, I'm not going to.
Don't do that. Things worked out okay, and it allowed us to move forward with who did we get in place last year?
I'm trying to remember. But
did we bring in any female?
Yeah, Kelly Klein.
Kelly Klein. She was fantastic.
She was. Her and B.J. Whitmer.
And before and Thunder Rosa before that.
Yeah, I'll shout at Thunder Rose out.
Shout outs.
And I'll shout Thunder Rose out on this podcast as well.
Good.
She's amazing.
She sure was.
One of my favorite people that we've brought in here. And, yeah. So, one thing, I can't just have you on here just to be nice and sugarcoat everything. I got to give you a hard time on here.
Yeah, I can handle that.
We'll call this My Frustrations with Ken Murphy.
Dun, 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 dun.
The time where Ken Murphy did not take my booking advice and did not bring in Ming and the Barbarian like I requested.
Steiners.
Yep.
Look, it can't be a surprise to anyone that some of the shows don't go the way we want, and we don't break even. Ming and Barbarian were, man, they would have been yeah, man. In retro, and of course you knew it going in. And in retro, I can say, yeah, absolutely right. I think that would have. That's not the only booking I turned a blind eye to when you, And I lay it off on Jason. I'll lay it off on Jason. Oh,
cough,
Jason.
Cough, Tommy Dreamer, cough.
No, you're gonna get our other partner all worked up if you don't stop.
Yeah, that was probably the most wild adventure of the CCW times. Was that booking was a loud shouting match back and forth in Chaffee.
3 hours worth.
Yeah.
early on in our relationship, early on in our business relationship.
Yep.
But we knew we definitely were going to be butting heads on some difference of an opinion as it relates to our budgets, our show budgets. Mm-hmm. How much money are we spending to bring in? And some of them didn't make as much financial sense as we thought. And we tried to learn, and we kept making the same mistakes over and over. But I think we're in a good place moving forward.
So just remember, for those of you listening out there who are like, hey, I want this person to come into CCW, I want this person to come into CCW. Right. Make sure if you support these shows and you get out here and you get your tickets, you get your merch, you come out, you support the shows, the more you support, the bigger we grow and the bigger names that we can get to come in, including some of the people that Ken has been looking into coming in for 2020, which we can't really talk about on here just yet. So you never know who it could be.
No, I think our track record speaks for itself, and I think the fans
and maybe you didn't know. Who knows?
well played. I think the fans know that the anticipation of who's coming. It's going to be exciting. I think it's been exciting these last 4 years. I think we brought people to town that I never thought we would bring to town.
That was my response when we brought Homicide.
Yeah, right? Probably never thought it was going to happen.
Right.
You know, his name would get thrown out at least every other month.
Kind of like Ravens.
And they just get, and I never saw it as a viable. Did I ever see it as viable? I don't know. What did I know about Homicide? I knew about Raven, but I didn't know about Homicide's work too much. I heard of him, but he was tremendous. Yeah, you guys out there, I know we want to see, the top talent, the top draws in the country, indie or otherwise. There's a lot of great names out there. Some are difficult, some are impossible. That's not true. Some are very difficult. There's levels of difficulty, but I think you can rest assured.
Yeah, they start out with boom boom.
I think you can rest assured through the end of this year and into 2020. We will work hard, and we will do it. We will. Our mission will be to bring entertaining shows and that are reasonable for your entertainment dollar. And you're going to be surprised. I mean, I could go through the names, and I think they speak for themselves. I think Matt Hardy,
EC3.
Billy Gunn, EC3, Joey Ryan. We could go on and on. I mean, there's been so many.
Did you ever get your picture with Joey Ryan?
No.
There's a fun little story. Ken's a big Joey Ryan mark. However, Ken has always been too scared to get a picture with Joey.
Not true. I was too busy or never in the right setting, but we have had Joey Ryan to Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Twice. And I was in his presence in Las Vegas on at least 2 different occasions and still do not have a picture with Joey Ryan. So what does that tell you?
You're scared of him?
Joey Ryan will return. Joey Ryan will return again and again and again until I get my picture and Lee gets a proper picture with Homicide and Hernandez.
I got a proper picture with Homicide.
You did.
In Chicago.
The $11.
Yep. With Homicide and with the King, the God, Nick Gage. It ended up being a great impromptu photo op. So
we should do something like a poll. Do you want to see Nick Gage and Cape Girardeau? And we'll let them decide. We'll throw it at them, and the winner, whatever number is bigger on whatever side of the paper. Yes or no?
Ken, you'd have a heart attack if it came back in the yes.
No, I wouldn't, Lee. I told you I have matured. And I want to see him here, not as much as you want to see him here, but I want to be supportive of the talent you want to bring in, and I'm moving in that direction. I am.
And like I said, we're always open for suggestions.
For sure.
If you feel like you got somebody that you think you'd like to see here, shoot the Cape Championship Wrestling page a message and say, hey, it would be cool if such and such person came in. Hey, it would be cool if Nick Gage came in.
Hey, if you have the hookup on my third cousin lives next to so-and-so's sister, let us know how we'll make that, give us the insight on your favorite wrestler, actor.
Yeah, we are not afraid to make them awkward phone calls.
Shoot, no. We'll get all in their emails and, do you know who we are in Cape Girardeau? And they say, no, not really. And I say, well, here's who we are.
So with that being said, like I said a few minutes ago, make sure you support the local events that come out. That's how we grow. That's how we're able to get bigger people in here. And like I said, October 18th and 19th is the next big event. Cape FearCon at the Osage Center, Cape Girardeau, Missouri.
And
tickets still on sale for this.
No, we pulled them off. Single-day tickets are still on sale at the website, www.cape-con.com. Single-day tickets are still available. Weekend VIP have been pulled, so we can get them all worked out, organized, I should say. $10 to get in, $7 for kids. Come out and have a great time.
So is that your hint to tell me I'm going to pay $10 when I get there Saturday?
Lee, you're an Lee, you have an exhibit table. I can't charge you to get in.
You're Ken Murphy. You can charge me to get in.
Now listen, I may need about 30 minutes of your time to help me work on it. But other
right. I'm gonna need you to pull from pull from the table and come work the front door.
Drop the podcast.
The people up there has to have a lunch. So
can you go grab Raven's lunch?
Yeah, exactly. So also with that being said, it's not just the Cape Fear Con going on, but also that night is Cape Championship Wrestling's Halloween annual event, CCW Hardcore Halloween. Main event is Jackson Crowley with wrestling legend Raven going against Otis Crowley and Mr. 100 in his corner.
Yeah, shout out to the CCW event. It is Hardcore Halloween at the Osage Center. So I don't want to confuse everyone. The Osage Center is a pretty big place, and we found that bringing these two events together on October 19th was good for business. So it will be a great day. Come spend the day at Cape Fear during the day on Saturday, and that evening we're going to have a fantastic CCW wrestling card.
And you can get tickets for those at capewrestling.com. There's still, at the time of recording, there's still a handful of front row left. They're $15, and general admission tickets are $11 in advance. They'll be $13 a day of the show at the door. Doors will open at 6. Bell time is 7 p.m. So make sure that you come out for both events. Come out to Cape Fear Con, meet Scout Taylor Compton, meet Raven, meet Big Lee from Big Lee's World, and also come out that night and see a great night of wrestling action, including the main event for the heavyweight title, Jackson Crowley with Raven against Otis Crowley with Mr. 100 in his corner. A lot of great talent is signed for that event, including an upcoming guest on the podcast. Mr. Cash Boarding will be on here to talk about his wrestling career and all of his great business he's done within the wrestling business. And with that being said, I want to thank you, Ken, for being a guest on here. Where can people find you on social media?
I am on Facebook at Ken Murphy. I am on Twitter at, is it Ken Murphy CCW? At Ken Murphy CCW? I'm almost sure of it.
It is. Usually our guests know their Twitter handle. That's kind of why I was waiting for this question.
Lee, I think you signed me up for Twitter.
No, you actually had to create another one.
Oh, my gosh.
Because you didn't like the one I created. So Ken Murphy at Ken Murphy CCW on Twitter. Okay. Where can they find you on Instagram?
No, don't even go there. I don't know. I don't get on Instagram. I don't know where you can find me. I'm sorry.
So if the best way to find Ken Murphy on Twitter and Instagram is if you follow Big Lee's World on Twitter and Instagram at Big Lee 756, you can go through the followers there and you'll be able to find Mr. Ken Murphy. And once again, thanks for being a guest on here. I'm excited to be part of the inaugural Cape Fear Con.
Thanks, Big Lee. Listen, man, I'm proud of you. This was a passion of yours for years. I'm fairly certain for you to put the actionable work in and get your Big Lee's World podcast up and running and doing so well. I'm proud of you, and I was really proud to be a guest on this. Thank you for all that you put over. Let's do it again sometime.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. Thanks for being a guest on here. Like I said, appreciate all the love and support to everybody listening to this out here. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, shoot us an email at bigleesworld@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/bigleesworld. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at biglee756. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment. For each podcast episode, share it, get your friends to listen. And I look forward to seeing everybody at Cape Fear Con on October 18th and 19th. Thanks again for listening. Everybody, have a great day.